Hello guys, welcome to the study of economics. So what are we going to do in this course? There are a lot of things to cover here. Consumer behavior, firm behavior, demand and supply, elasticities, how markets function, etc. in microeconomics first, and then later macro things like GDP, inflation, growth, poverty, sustainable development. It's a very exciting journey in front of us. But to be able to use all this knowledge well, you need to also enjoy the subject, learn the language of economics, and learn to see things the way an economist would. Economics is just like many other fields of study. Take physics, for example. We actually use physics every single day, right? We use principles of physics when we go in a car or a bus, or when we switch on the lights or check our phones. So we use physics daily. Of course, we don't always think about it or even know all the technical aspects, but we still use it, right? Just like this, we all use economics on a daily basis too. Every time you buy any product or do a bank transaction or even just decide to go by car or bike instead of city bus, you're actually using economics. But again, even though we are using economics in our everyday lives, more often than not, we are not aware of it either, especially the technical aspects. But if we want to understand at a deeper level, we need to look at the economics that underlie these everyday activities. Economics is everyday life in many ways, especially microeconomics, as we'll see later. And to really start thinking about things in this way, you need to unlock your inner economist. You need to start thinking like an economist. Now, what does that mean? What does it mean to think like an economist? First thing to do is you need to learn the language of economics. Economists speak a different language, we can say, in the sense that when studying economics, we'll often end up using terms that are not common in everyday conversations. In fact, every field of study has its own language and its own ways of thinking, right? Mathematicians talk about axioms, integrals, and vector spaces. Psychologists might talk about ego, id, and cognitive dissonance. Physicists might talk about momentum, electrons, and quantum dynamics. And economics is no different. Supply, demand, elasticity, opportunity cost, comparative advantage, consumer surplus, deadweight loss, these terms are part of the economist's language. In the coming chapters, you will encounter many new terms like this and even familiar terms that have different meaning in the language of economics. Words like rent or demand or capital. At first, this new language may seem a bit complicated, but as you'll see, its value lies in its ability to provide you with a new and useful way of thinking and talking about the world in which you live. The second part of learning to think like an economist is about cultivating a logical way of approaching everyday life and its questions and mysteries. And the last part, of course, is to actually learn the economic principles and theories so that you have the tools that you need to apply to various situations. And this is what is distinctive about how economists confront a question. They treat it as a mystery or a riddle, but as a rational mystery, which means economists try to logically solve the mysteries using the economic tools and principles which they have learned. And then they frame the question and the answers in the language of economics. We should also train ourselves to do this. First, by learning the principles and then learning how to apply them correctly. That is how we unlock our inner economist. And when we unlock this inner economist, we'll also be able to start looking at everyday life as full of rational mysteries that can be explained. It's detective work all the way. And over the next few chapters, we'll learn how to use the investigative tools of the economist. Everyday life is full of puzzles that many people do not even realize are puzzles. And my hope is that, along with learning the concepts well, you will also be able to see the fun you can have in solving them. Let us look at a few such puzzles now, just to get a flavor for what we mean by the economic way of thinking. We'll start by asking a simple question, something which all of us might have experienced. Why are things we buy in some places, like airports or metro stations, much more expensive compared to other places? Like, for example, coffee or a Subway sandwich. This question came up recently when I was having coffee with a friend of mine at an airport Starbucks a couple of weeks ago. The bill came and suddenly my friend, her inner economist awakened by the coffee, wondered, why is this so expensive only here? She had the same coffee from the same brand for half the price yesterday. Only at the airport I have to pay so much, she complained to me. Now, I don't drink coffee, so I was not really bothered about the price as such, but a good economist never passes up a mystery, or a chance to act smart for that matter. I went for the simple explanation first. Thousands and thousands of anxious, worried, irritable and often late passengers are passing through the airport every day, right? And especially in the morning and evening times, they need their coffee fixes to relax them or energize them or whatever coffee is used for. They would happily pay up for some coffee conveniently available to them right there in the airport. And the Starbucks and the Costa coffees of the world know this very well, which is why a cafe is placed inescapably right at the entrance once you check in. This is no coincidence. The first shop you'll pass on your way out of the airport is another coffee shop. You find such conveniently located coffee shops all over the planet, catering to the same desperate commuters and travelers. The coffee is not cheap, but the people can afford it. And really, what choice do they have? Because the point is not just that these coffee shops are so convenient. It's also that it will be very inconvenient to try and avoid them. If you don't have the coffee now, you might get your next chance only hours later. At the other end of your flight is another airport and another expensive coffee. Only once you get back to the city, which is usually far away from the airport, would you get a chance to drink more reasonably priced coffee. So, the key point for us is that there's a huge demand for the most convenient coffee possible, and people are willing to pay for that convenience. And this makes the location of the cafes very crucial. The position of the cafe inside an airport or just outside a metro station is very advantageous. Not just because it's located at an efficient and convenient spot, but also because there are no other coffee shops nearby enough. It's hardly a surprise that they do a roaring trade. The coffee itself is the same, whether in the airport or the mall. It's for the extra convenience that we are coughing up the extra bucks. And by the way, sometimes it's not just for conveniently available coffee, but for the convenience of free Wi-Fi that a lot of customers end up in these cafes. That was my explanation for why the coffee is more expensive in airports. And I'm happy to report that this explanation went well with my coffee connoisseur friend. But now she had another question, or rather a conclusion. And considering how much coffee she drinks, it's hardly a surprise that the bitter conclusion she came to after all my explanation was that somebody is getting filthy rich out of this scam. And she was not happy about this. The actual coffee in that cappuccino cost only pennies. To that, we can add the cost of milk, electricity, and the cost of paying the baristas or the servers to smile at grouchy customers all day long. Quick calculations were made, and we found that even after adding all that up, we still get something a lot less than the price of a cup of coffee. We asked Google and found that markups on coffee are around 150%. It costs less than $1 for a small latte, which sells for almost $2.5. So yes, I also had to agree. Somebody is making a lot of money. But who? You might think that the obvious candidates are people like Howard Schultz, the owner of Starbucks. After all, most of such prime spots are captured by Starbucks. It's actually an integral part of their business model. But the answer isn't as simple as that. What makes a Starbucks special? Is it just the taste or the ambience? The truth is that Starbucks' most significant advantage is its location. Right in the eye lines of thousands of eager travelers. There are a few such sweet spots for coffee shops, in airports, by station exits, or busy street corners. Obviously, Starbucks and its rival coffee shop brands have snapped them up. And by now, we know that the nice prices that Starbucks can command on the cappuccinos is due neither to the quality of the coffee nor to the staff or the ambience. It is location, location, location. I had my detective hat on by now. Such discussions wake me up more than coffee ever can. Who needs coffee if we can have an intellectual early morning mystery to solve, right? So clearly, location is real important. But the key question is who controls the location, which is the most important resource in this scenario. Just imagine negotiations for the rental agreement in the various prime hotspots. The landlords at the busy street corner or the airport will not only be talking to Starbucks but to other chains like Costa Coffee, CCD, etc. and even smaller companies like Chai Point. With so much demand for the real estate, what do you think will happen to the rents? Imagine the scene. It's a bidding war. There are at least half a dozen competing companies on one side of the negotiating table, and on the other side is the landlord who owns the prime potential coffee shop site. The landlord will be able to dictate the terms, right? And he will force a high rent, which will not leave much profit for the cafe. The successful company which finally gets the site will expect some profit, but not much. If the rent looks low enough to leave a substantial profit, another coffee brand will be happy to pay a little extra for the site and bid more at the negotiation table. There is an unlimited number of potential coffee shops and a limited number of attractive sites. The demand for good sites is a lot more than the supply. And that means the landlords have the upper hand. So what is the conclusion? If my friend had to curse someone, it was the landlords or whoever collected the high rents. That is where her money was going, I assured my friend. Now, this is pure armchair reasoning. I had no evidence to back up any of these claims. And so it's definitely reasonable to ask if all of this is actually true. And yes, on the second line of reasoning, my friend was not entirely convinced. After I had explained to my long-suffering friend over a second cup of coffee all of the principles involved, she asked me whether I could prove it. I had to admit that it was just a theory. As Sherlock Holmes might say, a piece of observation and deduction based on the clues available. And that was that. We paid for the expensive coffees and left. However, a couple of weeks later, I got a WhatsApp forward from my friend. She had not given up her quest for answers about who was making her coffee so expensive. It was an article from the Financial Times, which relied on industry experts who had access to the accounts of coffee companies. The article began, "Few companies are making any money," and concluded that one of the main problems was the high cost of running retail outlets in prime locations with significant passing trade because of high rents. Reading accounts is dull. Economic detective work is the easy way to get to the same conclusion. The right conclusion, it turns out this time, with a bit of luck. And it makes one feel real smart too. And this is what economics is all about. First, it's about observing the world with genuine curiosity and admitting that it's full of mysteries. Second, it's about trying to solve those mysteries in ways that are logically consistent and in tune with the basic economic ideas. There are a lot of good reasons to learn about economics, but the main reason, at least I believe so, is that economics is a great tool for solving mysteries, and solving mysteries is a lot of fun. And in most of the chapters, we'll be donning our Sherlock hats and we'll be solving such rational mysteries and having fun. And at the same time, we'll also be learning the basic concepts and tools of microeconomic analysis like theories and equations and definitions too. And the hope is that some of these mysteries and principles will give you some aha moments where you say, I've often seen this and now I understand why. That is the aim. Unlocking your inner economist basically means you should start having a lot more of these aha moments where ideas click and you can make sense of things. Your inner economist sees patterns that you might not be seeing at first glance. Studying economics is all about uncovering these hidden patterns in the world and in our own choices and having those aha moments. The aha principle, if you can call it that, basically means that if the basic concepts are presented well, economics should make sense. Good economists believe that we live our lives and make many of our decisions according to economic principles that can be understood and explained. The idea is that a clearly expressed economic observation should really matter to us personally. It should be a revelation. When the aha goes off, that's our inner economist speaking. And the more you apply the economic principles that we learn in this course to real life, the more of those ahas you'll have. And the more you'll be discovering, liberating, and strengthening your inner economist. Let us look at a couple more rational mysteries and get a bit more familiar with this way of thinking. This one is based on another question asked by a friend, this time at a movie theater, where a bunch of us had come to watch the latest Avengers movie. The big mystery was, drumroll, Why does popcorn cost so much more at movie theaters? Not the big mystery you're expecting? Yeah, but the point I'm trying to make is that good economic insights hide in plain sight. Later, we'll see more adventurous mysteries like how underworld dons and drug mafias work. But for now, let's stick to this easier question. Now, most of my friends knew the answer to this one, because once they get you in the door, they can charge whatever they want. Basically, you're trapped, have no options, and thus forced to buy at the high prices. And nowadays, external beverages and food are not allowed inside most theaters. So you're even more trapped and forced to buy at the higher prices, right? At first glance, yes, sounds right. But we had reached early and there was plenty of time for the movie to start. So we decided to go a bit deeper into the mystery. It can't be that simple, right? Once we thought about it a bit, one point we had to consider was that the customers can adjust. They know they're going to be charged high in the theaters. So they can use strategies. They can eat beforehand and come so that they're not hungry, or if allowed, they can bring their own snacks, etc. And as we know, some people try to sneak in some snacks anyway. So once more and more people figure out that price inside is higher, eventually the demand should come down for the popcorn inside the theater and thus cause the price to drop as well. We kept discussing this for some time and we couldn't come up with a solid reason for why the prices are so high and why people still continue to buy in spite of the high prices. That is when one of us noticed that the movie was about to start and there was a huge queue in front of the popcorn shop. He broke in and told, "Guys, shall we get some popcorn?" All of us immediately said yes and then started saying, "Hey, I'll pay, etc." We forgot about our potentially Nobel Prize winning investigations and went in for the movie. Later, once I was back home, suddenly it clicked. Our behavior when we were going to buy the popcorn was the solution. Yes, the popcorn was expensive, but we didn't care. What we cared was how we were perceived by our friends. We didn't want to look stingy by saving on popcorn. In fact, we all wanted to look extravagant by offering to pay for everyone else's expensive popcorn as well. And that was the answer. The expensive popcorn is not targeted at the people who want to save. Moviegoers who are sensitive to price will bring their own snacks from home or go without, etc. No, it is targeted at people like us, people who are not sensitive to price. That is, people who are not bothered much about the price. Perhaps because they are on a date or with a bunch of friends and don't want to look stingy. They will pay for the overpriced popcorn. Very clever, right? So just like earlier, you're paying for the convenience also. In addition to the coffee, here you're paying not just for the popcorn, but also for preserving your status. One last mystery before we move on to a serious work of studying the theory and stuff. This time, we're at a fancy restaurant. You might have noticed that some items like alcoholic drinks are more costly in restaurants. What could be the reason for this? Now here also, the same principle applies to an extent. People coming to drink are normally in a party mood and less interested in saving money and thus less sensitive to price. Status trumps savings. But another reason is that one of the big costs in a restaurant business is table space. Restaurateurs would therefore like to charge customers for dawdling. But because they cannot do that directly, they charge higher prices for products that tend to be consumed in longer meals, such as drinks and wine. Let's take another similar mystery. Have you noticed that desserts and ice cream are so much more expensive in restaurants compared to dedicated ice cream parlors? Just think about it. The logic is more or less the same. Ordering starters and desserts, normally part of a full course meal, are in fact another signal to the restaurant that you're going to be spending more time at the table. And also that most likely you're not very price sensitive, because we tend to go for full course meals only when eating out as a group, right? The restaurant owners know this very well. And that is why these items also tend to be overpriced in restaurants. The restaurant is again charging you for the time at the table. So the next time you wonder why a scoop of ice cream is 3 to 4 times more expensive inside a restaurant than outside, you know the reason. You're paying for using the table space longer and not just for the ice cream. With that, let me take the Sherlock hat off for a while and let's stop with the examples and the mysteries for now. In fact, throughout this course, we'll be engaged in active learning like this. You can learn a language only by speaking and writing it, right? And you can learn tennis only by playing the game. Just like that, you can learn economics only by doing economics. And because ultimately I want you to learn how to do economics rather than just read or listen passively as your teachers teach economics, I encourage you to try and stay actively involved. Not just when we are studying economics, but in general. Be detectives, find interesting mysteries to solve, and use the tools you'll be learning in this course to solve them. This is active learning. This kind of active learning just means that we will encounter the core ideas or concepts of economics not in a textbook fashion but through such stories, slowly building them up. And once the core concept is clear to us, I'll define it for you, formally restating it as in a proper textbook definition. For example, instead of just telling you about a concept like opportunity cost, we'll usually first build up to the idea by seeing how it works in the context of a specific example like the desert island we'll see in the next chapter. Often, these examples will be followed by case studies for you to try, as well as applications that show the relevance of the idea to real life. Finally, we'll also have numericals and problems, where the same concepts can be applied to arrive at the solutions. Ideally, you should try working out these case studies and problems by yourself before seeing the discussions of the answers. And finally, most importantly, once you're done with all the studies, the case studies, the problems, etc., you should apply the economic principles that you learned to the world around you and also discuss them as much as possible. Whenever you come across an idea, a mystery, or an example that you find interesting, tell a friend about it. Try to figure it out together. Discussion is the best way to unlock your inner economist. You'll be surprised to discover how much the mere act of explaining an example or concept helps you understand and remember the underlying principle much better. The more actively you can become engaged in the learning process in this way, the more effective your learning will be, especially in a very practical, everyday subject like economics. And you grow more and more accustomed to thinking like an economist.